Daniel's ex-girlfriend got diagnosis with cancer. I discreetly sent her some money anonymously, but my attempt remained uncovered. Daniel hurled the card at me angrily. We're already married. What more do you want? Do you intend to shame someone who's dying with money? I remained silent, looking at him calmly. Daniel, you were the one who asked me to marry you first. The day we learned about Lily's cancer coincided with our anniversary getaway. As I was packing, I turned to Daniel and asked, should I include this dark green tie? Instead of responding, he stared blankly at his phone as if detached from reality. Daniel, I called out again, and he finally looked up at me. Mia, I hesitated. What's wrong? Lily is dying. After those words, he avoided my gaze and hurried out the door, moving with such urgency as if every moment was critical and he might not see her again. Upon reaching the hospital, I found Daniel already with Lily. He had just reviewed her diagnosis, his face somber, and asked, when did this happen? Lily was curled up on the hospital bed, her complexion pale and almost translucent. Last month, during a routine checkup, the doctor said it's too advanced. There's no hope for a cure. Before she could continue, she noticed me in the doorway and began to cry uncontrollably. I'm sorry, Mia. I didn't mean to interfere with your marriage. I'm just so terrified. I'm only 24. I don't want to die. Daniel turned to see me, his expression darkening with a hint of accusation. Why are you here? At that moment, mentioning our planned anniversary trip felt inappropriate, so I lowered my eyes and gently offered to help. I just wanted to see if there's anything I can do. No, it's fine. Before Lily could respond, Daniel snapped harshly, you should leave. As I walked away reluctantly, I glanced back to see Daniel holding Lily tightly, her face resting on his shoulder, eyes closed, tears flowing freely. You're everything I have, she whispered. Daniel, I have nothing but you. Daniel held her even tighter, his voice strained. I understand. It was clear they shared a profound love, inseparable. I stood there, overwhelmed with emotions yet powerless. In the shadow of death, the emotions of the living seemed trivial. Daniel and I had been childhood sweethearts, dating since we were 16. However, due to family changes, I had to move abroad, uncertain of when I would return. This uncertainty led me to break up with Daniel. He was furious, accusing me of not trusting him to handle a long-distance relationship. On my departure day, he arrived at the airport with teary eyes, saying, Mia, I'll wait for you to come back. No matter how long it takes, I'll always wait. His promise helped me endure the toughest days alone, completing a 5-year course in 3 years. But upon my return, Daniel had a new girlfriend, a young and pretty girl named Lily, who was his junior in school. I learned she had pursued Daniel for a long time, dedicating 2 years before he reluctantly agreed to be with her. After my return, a group of childhood friends met up. Someone brought up Lily. She's so needy. She follows Daniel everywhere. If he drinks, she stays to help him sober up. If he's ill, she cooks and takes care of him. I heard she even tried to join our gathering today. Daniel frowned, clearly irritated. Don't bring her up. Right, I forgot. Now that Mia's back, Daniel should probably end things with her. I instinctively looked at Daniel, but he wasn't paying attention, his head down, eyes fixed on his phone. The gathering ended on a sour note. Later, Daniel offered to drive me home, but his tense demeanor suggested he didn't genuinely want to. I calmly declined. No need. I didn't drink and I can drive myself. He seemed relieved and left. Later, I discovered that day was Lily's birthday. She had been photographed on the Ferris wheel holding a cake, forcing a smile. Daniel had rushed through the night to reach her just before midnight. When I got home, my partially packed luggage was still scattered in the bedroom. I began repacking, piece by piece. Reaching for my toiletry bag, I paused. Inside was an electric shaver, slightly old and bright sky blue. Something Daniel wouldn't typically buy. So, who gave it to him? The answer was clear. I stared at it for a moment before placing it back in the drawer. After dark, Daniel finally returned home. His eyes bloodshot, corners slightly red, and his expression weary. I approached him and said, I've canceled the flight. And the hotel? For my parents, when we return this weekend, we can tell them that what we promised to bring might not arrive this time. We'll get more on our next trip abroad. I was simply discussing our canceled plans. Suddenly, Daniel became angry, staring into my eyes with a harsh tone. "Why are you even telling me this? Can't you handle such a minor issue yourself?" I froze, suddenly recalling years ago when we first dated. Back then, in high school but different classes, I had trouble with some girls and dealt with it on my own without telling Daniel. Yet he found out and intervened, chasing the girls away and then confronted me angrily. "Why didn't you tell me when you were in trouble?" "I could manage it myself. But I'm your boyfriend." A teenage Daniel had insisted on being involved, visiting me every night for 2 weeks until he gradually made me share things with him, keeping him informed of my activities. Now he was saying, "Why are you even telling me this? Can't you handle such a minor issue yourself?" It seemed Daniel realized he was losing his composure, so he softened slightly. "Sorry, Mia. I'm just feeling a bit stressed." I took a deep breath. "I'm going to take a shower." When I emerged, Daniel was nowhere to be seen. I searched and found him on the upstairs terrace, smoking cigarette after cigarette. Daniel wasn't a habitual smoker. After a major fight with Lily and breaking up with her, he hadn't smoked until that night when I found him on the balcony, staring into the starry northern sky where the city's tallest Ferris wheel stood. Just like before, I didn't say anything and quietly returned to the bedroom. The next morning, I woke up with a splitting headache. I've always struggled with migraines, so I searched for painkillers. Suddenly, Daniel stormed out of the bathroom, furious. "Where is my shaver?" My temples throbbed, and before I could respond, he grabbed my wrist tightly. "Mia, where is my shaver?" he asked again, his grip painful. "It's in the bedside drawer." Daniel didn't say another word and began searching for the shaver Lily had given him. I rubbed my sore wrist, found some painkillers, and took 2 pills. Lily's cancer diagnosis had completely consumed Daniel's thoughts, leaving no room for my headache. To him, it was a minor issue. In the days that followed, Daniel didn't go to work. He spent his time contacting every top oncologist in the city. They all confirmed the same prognosis. Lily's cancer was terminal, and no treatment could offer a cure, only a slight extension of her life. Each confirmation deepened the pain on Daniel's face. One evening, while driving home from work, I saw Daniel and Lily in the yard. Compared to before, Lily looked even thinner. She had removed her blue and white striped hospital gown and was wearing a wine-red slip dress, sitting on the swing in the yard. The golden-red sunset bathed her in a warm glow, contrasting her pale face. There was Daniel, kneeling on one knee before her, applying lipstick to her pale lips. I watched quietly from my car. At that moment, I couldn't help but think that perhaps Daniel's biggest regret was marrying me. I stayed at a nearby bar until midnight, and Daniel finally seemed to realize I was there. So he called me. "Mia, where are you?" Before I could respond, the sound of a band playing filled the phone. Daniel paused, then said, "I'll come get you." By the time he arrived, the band had finished their last song and left the stage. I was sitting in a corner with an untouched mojito on the table. Daniel stood before me, the dim light giving his face a solemn look. "Why did you come here alone to drink?" "I didn't," I replied. "I just ordered a drink and sat here listening to music." Hearing this, Daniel's expression softened slightly. He took my hand. "Let's go home." As I got into the car, I smelled the familiar scent of disinfectant. It was clear he only remembered me after sending Lily back to the hospital, so I asked, "How's Lily doing?" In truth, since learning about her illness, I had kept quiet about it with Daniel. This was the first time I brought it up. He couldn't avoid it anymore and had to answer. "Not well. I've arranged for the best doctors to treat her, but the situation remains grim." Realizing how that sounded, he added, "Mia, don't get me wrong. I just feel guilty for not treating her better before and want to make it up to her." That was the truth. Friends back home had told me Daniel hadn't treated Lily well. 6 months after I went abroad, Daniel met Lily. She was grateful for his help in solving her problems, and her gratitude blossomed into love over 2 years. No matter how distant or sarcastic Daniel was, she remained passionately devoted. Eventually, he was moved. But even while dating, Lily always gave more. Thinking of this, I sighed deeply. Besides, she's about to die. Daniel's voice even cracked slightly when he said that. The helplessness and guilt that come when a healthy person faces an unbeatable illness were feelings I understood too well. At that moment, I felt utterly powerless. Even though Daniel is my husband and I his legal wife, the rest of the car ride was silent. As we passed through a garden on our way home, I instinctively paused in front of the swing. Daniel turned and asked, "What's wrong?" I shook my head. Nothing. It was so blinding. When I suggested we go to the hospital with Daniel to visit Lily, his initial reaction was to look at me suspiciously. I pretended not to notice. "Is that not okay?" After a few seconds, Daniel finally agreed. "It's fine." Perhaps due to recent improvements in her treatment, Lily looked much better. After some conversation, she mentioned wanting to be discharged and return to work. "I know it's impossible to be fully cured, but in my last few months, I want to live as normally as possible. Is that okay?" She looked at Daniel with hopeful eyes. Naturally, he didn't refuse. Daniel suggested arranging a job for Lily in his company, but she immediately declined. No, that wouldn't be fair. I want to find a job on my own merit." Unsurprisingly, Daniel turned to me. "I'll pay her salary. You don't have to assign her any actual work. It won't affect you." I couldn't help but smirk sarcastically and asked, "Daniel, what exactly do you think I am?" He froze briefly, then sighed. "But she's sick. Yes, she's sick. She has cancer. She's dying. So whatever she wants to do, we healthy people have to accommodate her unconditionally." After a long pause, I took a business card from my bag and handed it to him calmly. "I'll give you the HR contact. Let her submit a resume and go through the normal interview process." Daniel didn't take the card. Instead, he looked at me with a cold stare, as if seeing me for the first time. "Mia, being so petty with someone who's about to die, you make me feel scared." Even after Daniel walked away, I stood there motionless, holding on to my last shred of dignity. A young girl then approached me from behind, tapped my shoulder, and gently said, "Mia, your pants are dirty." I snapped out of it and thanked her. In reality, my lower back had been sore since I woke up that morning. My period had started early while I was in the hospital corridor. Daniel was so preoccupied with Lily that he didn't notice me buying sanitary pads from the convenience store or using the bathroom. Years ago, when I had my first period at school, it was chaotic, and Daniel went to the school shop to buy sanitary pads and tied his jacket around my waist. But that was when Daniel was only 14. I had my assistant look into Lily's background. It wasn't much different from what I had imagined. She had a tragic life, no loving parents, and always lived in poverty. Daniel was the only source of light in her life. Without his help, she might not have been able to afford her cancer treatment. So I had my assistant transfer money to Lily's account under her family's name. Not employing her at my company was the last boundary I maintained in our marriage. Sending her money was an act of compassion as a fellow human being. I didn't expect Daniel to discover it. That night when I returned home, I turned on the lights and saw Daniel standing by the entrance, staring blankly at me. I was surprised. "You're home early today?" His response was to throw a bank card at my face, hitting me near my eye. Sharp pain spread from my temple, intensifying and causing my fingers to curl in discomfort. Daniel approached me, gripping my wrist tightly, his voice filled with anger. "We're married now. What more do you want? Why are you humiliating her by giving her money?" "I didn't. Mia, you've had a wealthy and perfect family since childhood. You studied at the best schools abroad, returned, and joined your family's company. I broke up with her and married you. Everything has gone smoothly for you, but she has nothing? Does humiliating her make you feel even more superior in your noble life?" I closed my eyes, countless memories flashing through my mind like a fragmented movie. "Daniel," I tried to keep my voice calm, but there was still a tremor in it. "You can't talk to me like this. You can't." Daniel released my hand, took a step back, and looked at me as if he wanted to say something. But his phone rang at that moment. He pulled it out, and Lily's name appeared on the screen. Daniel's expression changed slightly, and without hesitation, he brushed past me and left the room. I stared at the painting on the wall, gently pressing the injury near my eye. The pain intensified. After that night, Daniel didn't come home for several days. He didn't contact me, but I knew it was because Lily's condition had worsened. She was in unbearable pain, crying and calling Daniel. Daniel, who had always been there for me, chose to go to her without hesitation. I went to a distant hospital for a full-body checkup, and the doctor sternly advised, "Miss Liu, you need to find a way to release your emotions. It will be beneficial for you." I remained silent for a long time. "Thank you, but I don't have anyone to talk to." Who could I even confide in? During those 3 years abroad, at my lowest, I fainted from a stomach hemorrhage and was hospitalized by a barely acquainted classmate. Upon discharge, while walking through a quiet street, I was caught in a shootout, and a bullet grazed my waist. I had grown accustomed to being alone, especially since Daniel and I were broken up. When I returned, he already had Lily by his side. I couldn't say anything. Accepting Daniel's proposal was admittedly selfish. Because on countless nights when I could barely hold on, I thought of the boy who had stood at the airport with red eyes, telling me he'd wait for me, and that thought always gave me a little more courage. As I reflected on the past, I slowly walked out of the hospital. Suddenly, someone stood before me. I looked up to see Daniel, staring at me with a cold and frightening expression. His voice filled with fear. "Mia, why are you at the hospital?" I froze for a moment, then suddenly understood. He was afraid I might end up like Lily. So I smiled. "Just a checkup." Daniel didn't believe me, so I pulled out the checkup report from my bag and handed it to him. I kept the psychologist's report to myself. The data showed nothing seriously wrong with my body. Daniel's face remained tense as he carefully reviewed the report twice. He then focused on the line that read, "Old waist injury, no major issues," and asked me, "What injury is this? Why have I never heard you mention it?" I froze for a moment. Oh, it was from a shootout abroad. I was slightly injured. As we got into the car, Daniel's gaze was so cold it felt like it could freeze over. Feeling helpless, I stared at the passing scenery for a while before deciding to speak. "Don't worry, I know my body well. I get a checkup every year. I'm not like Lily." "Why didn't you call me?" He abruptly interrupted me, slamming on the brakes and pulling the car to the side of the road. He unbuckled his seatbelt and leaned toward me. I knew he was asking about today's checkup, so I looked at him calmly. "It was just a routine checkup. Isn't Lily's condition unstable these days?" Mentioning Lily caused a complicated emotion to flash in his eyes, resembling both jealousy and anger. But ultimately his focus returned to me, his voice less confident. "When you were injured so badly before, you should have told me, Mia." This time I couldn't help but laugh. "When I was injured," I paused slightly, "it should have been the day you were finally moved by Lily's persistent pursuit and agreed to be with her." In the days that followed, Daniel's attitude toward me became much more affectionate. Beyond our exhausting married life, he would even wait for me in his car outside my office every day when I left work. For a moment, it felt like we were 18 again. Back then, there was nothing between us except pure and intense love. I kept wondering and speculating until I finally told him, "You don't have to feel guilty. Even if you had known back then, being half a world away, it wouldn't have made a difference." The smile on Daniel's face instantly disappeared. He took a deep breath. "I'm not trying to make it up to you, Mia. You're my wife. We've only been married for a little over a year. This is how things are supposed to be." Before I could say anything, Daniel's phone, which was on the dashboard, suddenly lit up. It was a message from Lily. Surprisingly, Daniel didn't respond. I asked him, "How is Lily doing?" Daniel let out a cold laugh. "What does that have to do with me? She has plenty of people who want to take care of her. She doesn't need me." I thought if he looked into the rearview mirror at that moment, he would see his eyes filled with burning jealousy. I soon understood why. At the end of the month, I visited a relative in the hospital, and coincidentally, Lily was there too. As I passed by her room, I saw her in her hospital gown, her thin fingers repeatedly dialing a number. Beside her stood a young man in a black baseball cap. He cast a dark glance at me through the doorway and gently said to Lily, "Stop calling. After all, he's married now and needs to go home to his wife. Lily, you still have me." Lily acted as if she hadn't heard him. She continued to dial Daniel's number, tears streaming down her face as she pleaded, "Don't ignore me, Daniel. You promised you'd stay with me until the end." I admit, at that moment, I felt envious of her. My life had always followed a predetermined path, leaving me with no choices. When I returned home, Daniel had already prepared dinner. I casually mentioned, "I saw Lily today. She looks like she's lost more weight." Daniel stared at me, his expression immediately turning serious. "Why did you go see her?" That piercing look snapped me out of my momentary trance. I laughed mockingly. "Don't worry, I wasn't there to cause her any trouble. I just happened to pass by while visiting someone else." "That's not what I meant," Daniel replied, avoiding my gaze. Perhaps to make it up to me, he suggested we go out for my birthday next month. We could catch a midnight movie, watch back-to-back showings, and then go to the beach to watch the sunrise. I should have refused, but the earnest look in his eyes and the plan he proposed, reminiscent of what we did together on my 16th birthday, made me agree. Back then, I had felt suffocated. Even though Daniel didn't know what was going on, he was sharp enough to notice my distress. So, in the middle of the night, he knocked on my window and took me out. We watched 2 movies together. Asterisk a little thing called Love Asterisk and Asterisk Roman Holiday Asterisk. By the time the movies ended, the sky was pale, and Daniel rode his bike along the coastal highway, eventually stopping at the edge of a cliff where the golden sun slowly rose from the sea. He confessed his feelings to me, but that was a long time ago. So long that now he had to recreate those memories to piece together the scattered details. So I agreed. I said yes, like that night when we were 16. Even if we watched the same movies, I couldn't regain the feelings we once had. It was as if whenever I was with Daniel, I found myself constantly reminiscing about the past. This meant the current Daniel could no longer balance my love and disappointment. I was simply unwilling to let go, still clinging to those moments when he held on to me and prevented me from falling. Once I realized this, I focused on Daniel beside me. He wasn't watching the movie either. Instead, he looked restless. Occasionally, he would pull out his phone, glance at it, and then put it away as if it had stung him. I quietly reminded him, "It's vibrating. Someone's calling you." Daniel forced a smile. "Don't worry about it. Today, I'm here to celebrate your birthday." Pathetic and laughable, I actually believed him. After the movie ended, Daniel finally answered Lily's 28th call. On the other end, I could hear her desperate sobbing. "Daniel, being sick is so hard. I vomited so much blood. Am I going to die, Daniel?" As I watched him, Daniel calmly put away his phone, leaned down, and kissed my cheek. "I'm going to the restroom." And then he never came back. I waited for a long time outside that secluded private theater by the sea. Eventually, I called Daniel. His phone was off. After hanging up, I saw that Lily had sent me a friend request on WeChat. I accepted it. She quickly sent several messages. "I'm sorry, Mia. I know today is your birthday. I wanted to prove how important I am to him. You're Daniel's white moonlight. No matter how well I treat him, I can't shake your place in his heart. But now I'm sick and dying. Let me be selfish just once and be a vile woman." White moonlight. That term, it was repulsive. I felt a surge of violent emotion rising within me, but before I could respond, a hand suddenly grabbed me, pulling me into a nearby alley with tremendous force. I fell to the ground in my dress, my knees and elbows scraping against the rough pavement and walls, sending waves of sharp pain through my body. I looked up and met a pair of gloomy, crazed eyes. They seemed familiar, yet strange. It was the young man in black from Lily's hospital room. "You're Daniel's wife. Who do you think you are making Lily upset? She suffers from cancer day and night. And you, being the happy little princess, aren't enough. You have to take away the man she loves, making her last days miserable too." He pulled the brim of his baseball cap lower, looking at me cruelly. "Make it hurt as much as possible, but don't let her pass out." The sky slowly began to lighten. The sunrise was almost here, and behind the young man, a tall, menacing figure emerged, stopping in front of me, dust scattered. Why does everyone think Lily is the one to pity? I'm the one who's lost everything. Those fragmented images flashed through my mind once again. This time, I saw them more clearly. I was 6 years old when my mother was suddenly diagnosed with late-stage breast cancer. Even after a full mastectomy, the cancer cells still spread. As she lay in bed, her vitality fading day by day, someone came to the house. It was my aunt, my mother's twin sister who looked about 80% like her. She naturally took over my mother's role, assuming everything that had once belonged to her. My father didn't protest because he knew both families had to stay connected. I was only 6, too young to understand why I had to call my aunt Mom, or why after she had been with us for just 1 month, I had a new half-sister. I only remember that on the day my mother passed, she held my hand tightly and said, "Mia, you must live well, live healthily." That sentence became my shackle. Every time I heard Lily say she didn't want to die, a surge of absurdity rose in my heart. Those who want to live well and be loved are the ones struck by terminal illness, while those who want to die must live on, carrying their guilt. At home, I wasn't allowed to do many things because I was the eldest daughter responsible for the Liu family, but my younger sister could act spoiled and do whatever she wanted. When my relationship with Daniel became known, my father sent my aunt to talk to me. She wore my mother's qipao and pearl necklace, looking at me with disdain and pity. "You can date, sure, but don't give away your first time, otherwise you'll lose your value. Mia, you're the older sister. You wouldn't want your younger sister to bear your responsibilities, would you?" When I turned 20, she gave me 2 choices. Either marry a business partner of my father's, who was 20 years older than me, someone my father couldn't easily sway, or go abroad to study business, return to Mary, and help manage the company. I chose the second option. Not long after I returned, they began evaluating suitable marriage partners to bind the family and maximize the Liu family's interests. Their approach was rational, clear-headed, and thorough. Except they never asked for my opinion. Luckily, Daniel proposed to me then. I accepted him, thinking he could still pull me away from the abyss like he had done for so many years, keeping me from falling. But by then, Lily was already by his side. When my dress was torn beyond recognition, I finally grabbed the stiletto heel that had been thrown aside. I raised it and struck down forcefully. Warm blood splattered on my face as the man collapsed, his body going limp. Holding the blood-stained stiletto, I leaned against the wall and slowly stood up. A few steps away, the young man heard the commotion and turned to look at me. There was a dark shadow in his eyes. "You've got some fight." I took 2 deep breaths and said to him, "It's always been your beloved Lily who's wronged me. No matter how much you like her, her heart only belongs to Daniel. Even if he's married, even if she's dying, she'll never think of you." "Shut up," he charged at me in a rage, slapping me across the face. "If you hadn't accepted Daniel's proposal, they would have made up after their fight and she would have been happy with him." My cheek burned with pain, but I tilted my head back and smiled calmly at him. Why shouldn't I have accepted it? If Lily had fought with Daniel and then wanted to marry you, would you have refused her? She's dying. No matter how much you care, you can't cure her cancer, so you take out your anger on someone innocent like me. I paused for a moment, then softly uttered 2 words. Pathetic. At that moment, I remembered what the doctor had said with a serious expression. "Miss Liu, you need to find a way to release your emotions. It will do you good." Turns out, he was right. The young man stared at me dumbfounded. After a while, he let out a heart-wrenching wail, slid down the wall, and curled up on the ground. He cried so miserably. I just stood there watching, feeling somewhat confused. These people always believe they're the most pitiful in the world. Lily, Daniel, and him, they're all the same. I barely managed to tidy up my tattered dress, and as I walked out of the alley, the first rays of sunrise appeared on the distant horizon. Gradually, the light filled the once dark sky. It was a beautiful sight, so it didn't really matter anymore whether Daniel was by my side to watch it with me. I hailed a cab and went to the police station, handing over the blood-stained stiletto and asking the officer if this counted as self-defense. The young female officer looked at me, her clear eyes full of pity. "Miss Liu, don't worry. The marks on your body prove it was an attempted assault, but are you okay?" I said I was fine, that it might hurt a little, but I could take care of the wounds myself. "Do you need me to contact your family to come pick you up?" Who could I contact? I lowered my eyes and smiled. No need. Everyone in my family is busy with their own lives. After finishing my statement, I went home, found the divorce papers I had prepared, signed them, and sent them to Daniel's company. Throughout this entire process, Daniel never contacted me once. But I saw from Lily's social media that he had taken her to Yunnan. The reason, of course, was the same as always. She was dying. It was her last wish. She sat on a swing, and Daniel pushed her high into the air, her pristine dress billowing in the wind. She said, "Daniel, when I die, bury my ashes here. I want to be a free spirit. If you ever think of me, come here and enjoy the view." How romantic. Even in death, she wanted to be so profound to ensure Daniel would remember her for a lifetime. After reading that post, I coldly deleted Lily from my contacts. I had already guessed Daniel's thoughts. His silence was a form of self-deception. He believed that as long as he didn't speak to me, he could quietly accompany Lily to the end of her life and then return to me, pretending nothing had happened and we could continue on. But that's impossible. Before leaving the city, I went to see someone. It was a mutual friend of mine and Daniel's named Alex. Because of my personality, I hadn't made many friends growing up. He barely counted as one. "I'm leaving," I declared. He bit his cigarette, standing up in shock. "No way. You've got cancer too?" I chuckled. "Of course not. I'm just not staying here anymore, going to another city." "What about the Liu family business and legacy?" "I'm giving it up," I said calmly, then repeated, "I never wanted it to begin with. Everyone knew about Daniel's tangled relationship with his terminally ill ex-girlfriend. They all laughed behind my back, so when I told my family about the divorce, my aunt gently said, 'It's fine. In families like ours, even a second marriage won't be without value.' I smiled. I have no value left, so don't count on it. The Liu family business is yours, and the things you've always coveted that belong to my mother, they've long been yours." I said, "If you don't want the scandal of forcing the eldest daughter of the Liu family to her death, then let me go." For the first time, hatred appeared in her always soft, gentle eyes. As if out of spite, she lowered her voice and softly said, "It's not your fault, Mia. Your husband would rather be with a dying woman. You really are pitiful." After my love and expectations for Daniel had completely vanished, her words no longer had the power to hurt me. I told Alex, "Anyway, if Daniel asks, don't tell him where I went. You have everything. Daniel, I have nothing left but this body." According to Alex, just a few days after I left, Daniel returned. He was alone, without Lily. I guess she didn't make it, but at least she died between the mountains and the sea, fulfilling her last wish. Daniel called me many times, but I didn't answer. Then he texted me, "What's going on? Are you divorcing me, Mia?" I didn't reply. There was no need to respond. Alex told me Daniel was like a caged, restless beast searching everywhere for me, even going to the Liu family. When he stormed in, my father and aunt were discussing whether they should drag me back and marry me off to a widower in his 50s who was wealthy and powerful. "Mia, you should have seen Daniel's expression," Alex marveled over the phone. "Also, didn't you report the incident? The police sent a notice to your house and called saying they couldn't reach you, but those 2 suspects in the attempted assault case have been caught." Alex kept me updated with other bits of news. Daniel went to the police station and asked for details about that day. Perhaps out of sympathy, the female officer told him everything. And then Daniel broke down. He collapsed on the sidewalk outside the police station, crying his heart out. Alex was with him, watching as Daniel lifted his red, tear-streaked eyes and asked again, "Do you know where Mia went?" "No idea," Alex shrugged, helpless. "You know Mia. Her heart's cold. None of us are close to her. She only ever cared about you." That seemed to completely crush Daniel. He started obsessively investigating everything I had been through over the years. What happened during those 3 years abroad? Every detail he uncovered seemed to break him further. I imagine he deeply regretted the things he said to me. But there's no undoing the past. Hearing about Daniel's suffering didn't bring me any satisfaction, only vast indifference. After all, whether I was going through those events or remembering them now, I couldn't muster much emotion. Because all my life I felt like a walking corpse, only ever moved by Daniel, who gave me a glimmer of hope in the stagnant waters of my existence. But now, even that is gone. One day, Alex told me our old high school was holding an anniversary celebration, inviting distinguished alumni to attend. Both Daniel's and my invitations were sent to Daniel's place. He went back to visit the teachers, and the former headmaster remarked nostalgically, "All these years you and Mia have been together and even got married. How rare. Not many young couples make it that far. Daniel stood there motionless, listening to the headmaster recall the past, details he had long buried in the corners of his memory. He must have remembered how deeply he loved you at 17 or 18, even after we all got drunk after the college entrance exams. Walking down the street, he kept muttering about how he was going to marry Mia one day. Alex paused. So, as we left the school, I told him, "Stop pretending. Mia was abroad for 3 years, and you never even thought about visiting her. You were too busy with Lily. Besides, she's already given up on you now." Daniel is a very smart man. From that one sentence, he figured out that I was still in contact with Alex, so he found a way to get my address from him. That afternoon, as I came back from the hospital with a bag of medication, I saw Daniel standing at the door. The moment he saw me, his eyes turned red. Mia, you're sick too, aren't you?" "No, I'm perfectly healthy," I replied coldly. "It's just some medication for psychological and mental health issues. I've been taking them for many years now, but it's not life-threatening. At least, it's not like cancer, which is incurable." With that, I brushed past him and headed toward the courtyard, but Daniel grabbed the hem of my clothes, pleading, "Mia, I don't want to divorce you." I found it absurd, because my love for him didn't disappear all at once. It slowly eroded over time. With each moment, he chose Lily, bit by bit. Now that Lily was gone, he came back to me. What was the point of that? So I calmly suggested, "Actually, if you can't let go of Lily, you could have gone with her." "I don't miss her." After raising his voice, Daniel's tone softened again. "I told you from the start, Lily had cancer. She was dying. I just felt guilty and wanted to accompany her through her final journey." I've lost count of how many times Daniel has mentioned Lily's illness in front of me, as if because she had cancer, the whole world had to accommodate her unconditionally. Death, in the face of it, demanded everything to yield. So finally, I laughed. What's so special about that? It's just cancer, just dying, isn't it? She's not the only one who's ever gone through that. Over the years, I've slit my wrists, inhaled charcoal fumes, and taken pills several times. It's just that each time I was saved. When she cried in front of you saying she didn't have long to live, I was actually envious of her. I envied her for being able to die without restraint. If I could, I'd have traded places with her. Let me die and let her live so she could be happy with you. Everyone would get what they wanted. Wouldn't that be better? Daniel stared at me in disbelief, his eyes like two deep, bottomless lakes now filled with wet despair and pain. "Mia, I didn't know. If I had known..." Daniel couldn't finish his sentence because he simply couldn't say anything more. It was clear he was the one who made the mistakes. He was the one who hurt me, yet here he was crying so miserably in front of me as if I had wronged him somehow. Even at this moment, I didn't feel much emotion. "Daniel, people change. People can change. So even though you promised at 20 that you'd wait for me, you changed your mind at 21. I never blamed you for that. I truly loved you so much that for all these years you were the only one who could stir my emotions. Even when you gave up on me and ran to Lily without hesitation, I could let it go. But that love you wore down little by little with your own hands, whether it's you or Lily or that lunatic who's in love with Lily, you all hurt me for the same reason, because I had everything. I lived a happy life while you were all stuck in impossible situations, unable to love, always lacking something. But now I've given up everything. I have nothing left. Can you finally let me go?" Daniel finally disappeared from my life. Occasionally, I would hear bits of news about him from Alex. For example, the 2 suspects in the assault case suddenly died in prison, or how the Zhao family suddenly began ruthlessly suppressing the Liu family's company, even taking orders at unreasonable prices just to undercut them. In the end, the Liu family went bankrupt, and the Zhao family was also severely weakened. The pure gold shackles that had bound me for over 20 years finally collapsed and disintegrated. When I heard the news, I was momentarily stunned before going to a nearby convenience store to buy some alcohol. Since I'd had my stomach pumped several times, my stomach had always been fragile, unable to handle alcohol well. Whenever I went to a bar, I'd just order a drink and leave it there, not actually drinking it. But moments like these, rare as they are, deserved some celebration. I took a couple of sips, felt a slight pain in my stomach, and put the can down. That's when my phone rang. I answered it. It was Daniel. His voice carried a hint of drunkenness. "Mia, I avenged you." For a moment, it was as if his voice had pulled me back to when I was 14. I'd been bullied, and he had fought for me. In the end, he came back to me, his face bruised, saying, "I won, Mia. I stood up for you." That was the beginning of my feelings for him, but I quickly snapped back to reality. Hanging up, Daniel, in a panic, pleaded, "Don't. Mia, I just want to hear you say a few more words." I smiled faintly. "Have you visited Lily recently?" Daniel didn't respond, but his breathing on the other end of the line suddenly became rapid, filled with bone-deep fear. "I forgot to tell you. The night you left me to go to Lily, she added me on WeChat. So every stop on your trip, every little thing you did, I knew it all. Daniel, I know you've done a lot for me, but I won't feel any gratitude toward you. You don't deserve it." The night breeze mixed with the soft moonlight gently blew across. After a long, long silence, Daniel's voice finally came through again, hoarse and choked with sobs. "Yes, I don't deserve it. Mia, everything is my fault. I'm the one who deserves to suffer. I beg you, please live well." I said nothing and just hung up. A couple of days ago, I went to the hospital for a follow-up. The doctor said my emotional state had improved significantly. Maybe escaping the heavy burdens of the past gave me a bit more courage to keep going. It had also been a long time since I dreamed of the teenage me and Daniel. I tossed the beer can into the trash and left the balcony. Tonight, I'll go to bed early. Tomorrow, I'll go to the beach to watch the sunrise.